In 2022, Russia's Arctic forces looked untouchable, with 32 military bases guarding $35 trillion in oil and gas, nuclear submarines concealed under the ice, and experts saying NATO was a decade behind. Then, the Ukraine war gutted Russia's elite Arctic brigades and left entire bases hollow almost overnight. How did the world's richest, most fortified frontier become Moscow's greatest vulnerability? To understand how this illusion unraveled, we have to go back to the Arctic gold rush. Russia's hold on the Arctic begins with geography. Over half of the Arctic coastline, 53%, falls under Russian control, stretching from the Barents Sea to the Chukchi. Beneath this frozen expanse lies a jackpot. The Arctic holds 80% of Russia's natural gas reserves and nearly a fifth of its oil. In the early 2000s, the Kremlin labeled the region the resource base of the 21st century, setting the tone for 2 decades of policy. U.S. Geological Survey estimates put the value of undiscovered Arctic oil and gas at up to $35 trillion, 13% of the world's untapped oil, and nearly a third of its natural gas. For Moscow, these numbers were not just projections, they became a mandate. In 2000, Vladimir Putin's Arctic strategy declared the region essential for Russia's economic future, linking national security to the ability to extract and defend these resources. The government poured money into exploration, mapping, and legal battles over the continental shelf, all to secure a claim on this frozen fortune. Officials spoke of the Arctic as Russia's answer to the Persian Gulf, a zone that could bankroll the next century. This vision shaped every major decision that followed, from infrastructure plans to the military buildup that would soon turn the polar frontier into one of the most fortified regions on Earth. In less than a decade, Russia transformed the Arctic from a neglected frontier into a fortress of steel and concrete. Engineers and soldiers carved 6 new military bases out of the tundra, each designed to operate through months of polar night and temperatures below -50 degrees. 13 Soviet-era airfields, once abandoned, roared back to life. Runways were lengthened, hangars rebuilt, radar domes rising over the ice. On Kotelny Island and the windswept archipelago of Novaya Zemlya, Russia stationed Bastion P coastal missile batteries and Pantsir S-1 air defense systems. These installations formed a layered shield meant to cover the approaches to the Northern Fleet's submarine pens and nuclear bunkers. The concept was simple: create a bastion where Russia's ballistic missile submarines, its ultimate nuclear insurance, could slip beneath the ice, undetected and untouchable. Every base, every missile, every runway was part of this grand strategy. The Northern Fleet's engineers built underground shelters for the Navy's most prized assets, carving tunnels deep into the permafrost to hide the silent giants of the Russian arsenal. Satellite images showed a spiderweb of new roads and fuel depots connecting the bases from the Barents Sea to the Bering Strait. By 2022, Russia's Arctic network counted 32 military installations, a chain that, on paper, outmatched anything the West could field north of the Circle. Experts warned it would take NATO a decade to catch up. For Moscow, the Arctic was no longer a blank space on the map. It was a fortress, bristling with sensors and missiles, ready to defend a $35 trillion prize. The Ukraine war drained Russia's Arctic muscle faster than any Western strategy could. The 80th Separate Arctic Motor Rifle Brigade, once trained for blizzards and polar darkness, found itself fighting for riverbanks in the Dnieper Delta. By mid-2024, reports estimated that 4 out of every 5 soldiers in the brigade had become casualties, killed, wounded, or missing. Survivors described being stranded on islands, cut off by Ukrainian raids, with no chance for evacuation. The Arctic's best, men who could ski for days and fix engines at -50 degrees Celsius, were lost in muddy trenches far from home. The 200th Motor Rifle Brigade, another elite Arctic unit, fared no better. Sent into Ukraine in the first months of the invasion, one of its battalion tactical groups was nearly wiped out. 645 out of 648 soldiers killed, according to Ukrainian officials. The brigade was rebuilt with sailors and reservists, many outfitted with Second World War-era helmets and body armor lacking plates. The loss of these specialists did not just weaken Russia's northern border. It erased decades of hard-won experience in Arctic warfare, the kind that cannot be replaced with a few months of retraining. Hardware losses cut just as deep. At least 3 Tor M2DT air defense systems, custom-built for the polar environment, were destroyed or captured between November 2022 and February 2023. These platforms, designed to keep NATO aircraft at bay above the Arctic Circle, now lay burned out in Ukrainian fields. As Arctic units bled out in the south, the home front grew vulnerable. In July 2024 and September 2024, Ukrainian drones struck Olenia Air Base near Murmansk, damaging strategic bombers that once symbolized Russia's reach. The fortress, once thought untouchable, now stood exposed by the very war meant to show its strength. Sanctions swept through the Russian Arctic like a blizzard, freezing projects that once promised to anchor Moscow's northern future, leaving them frozen. In October 2024, Arctic LNG-2, Russia's flagship liquefied natural gas project, ground to a halt. Western technology was suddenly out of reach. Without the compressors, turbines, and ice-class tankers supplied by foreign partners, production lines stood silent through the long polar night. The shutdown lasted into March 2025, stranding billions in investment and leaving local contractors idle. For companies like Novatech, the loss was not just revenue, it was a blow to credibility. Investors watched as the Kremlin's most ambitious Arctic venture became a cautionary tale, its modules frozen in place along the Ob River. The collapse did not stop at energy. The northern sea route, once hyped as a new maritime highway, saw cargo traffic plummet. In 2022, Russia moved 35 million tons along the route, less than half the government's 80 million ton target. By 2025, transit cargo all but vanished, dropping from over 2 million tons to a mere 41,000. Shipping insurers, spooked by sanctions and the risk of being blacklisted in Western markets, withdrew coverage. Without insurance, foreign captains refused to sail the ice-choked waters. Ports like Sabeta and Tixi emptied out, their cranes rusting in the salt air. Arctic infrastructure, once a symbol of Russian resurgence, now faces a maintenance backlog no new construction can hide. The Kremlin shifted its focus from expansion to triage, patching up what it could with dwindling budgets. For the oilmen, shipbuilders, and regional officials who once dreamed of Arctic riches, the war in Ukraine has turned the polar frontier into a stranded asset, locked down by sanctions, abandoned by global commerce, and left to weather the elements alone. NATO's advantage in the Arctic is not the result of a grand strategy, but of Russia's overreach elsewhere. Michael Brown, a military analyst, puts it plainly. Russia's decision to send its Arctic brigades south has created a conventional window for the alliance. The addition of Finland and Sweden to NATO has transformed the map. Over 1,300 kilometers of new alliance frontage now press against Russia's northwest border. The old Russian sanctuary, once shielded by geography and elite units, has vanished. Analysts at CSYSS argue that Moscow's ability to launch a rapid ground incursion across the Arctic is now, in their words, even more minimal than before the war. The balance has shifted. NATO's network of bases now outnumbers Russia's, and the alliance can exploit gaps left by depleted Russian forces. This is a window of opportunity, but even experts acknowledge it will not stay open forever. Moscow's Arctic ambitions now collide with hard arithmetic. In 2025, the Kremlin set aside 155 billion rubles, about $1.5 billion, for Arctic development. That figure is a fraction of the 3.7 trillion rubles experts say will be needed by 2035, just to keep pace with earlier plans. Two-thirds of Russia's remaining Arctic oil and gas reserves lie in fields that require Western technology to reach, technology now blocked by sanctions. Even as officials tout new partnerships with China, Beijing's status as a near-Arctic nation limits the depth of cooperation. For Kremlin planners, the options are shrinking. Patch up existing infrastructure, ration scarce funds, and wait for a thaw in relations that may never come. The fortress stands, but the resources inside grow harder to reach with each passing year. Today, Russia's shattered Arctic ambitions echo across a region rich in resources, but stripped of real power. As sanctions tighten and military gaps widen, the world watches a nuclear giant lose its grip. The true contest for the Arctic's future begins now. What do you think comes next?